Get off my porch before I shoot. Rowan Blackthorn's rifle trembled in his frostbitten grip. Inside the desolate cabin, his 3-day-old son, Eli, screamed, a relentless, jagged sound that hadn't ceased since the boy drew his first breath, the exact same hour his mother, Sarah, had drawn her last. Outside in the biting cold, the heavy-set woman didn't move. She couldn't. She was anchored to her knees in the blinding snow, a dark bloom of blood expanding across the front of her heavy wool coat. Pressed fiercely against her chest was a tiny, ragged bundle. Slowly, the bundle stirred. A small face emerged from the thick wool. Eyes impossibly blue, impossibly alive, lifted and locked onto Rowan's. And for the first time in 72 hours, the deafening screams inside the cabin went completely silent. Rowan did not lower the rifle. "Ma'am, I asked you a question. Who sent you?" The woman's lips were cracked and bleeding. She tried to speak, but the cold had stolen her voice. She swallowed hard and tried again. "Nobody. Nobody sent me. I followed the smoke, followed it from the freight road. I've been walking since the first storm." Rowan stared, his jaw clenching. The first storm had broken 3 nights ago. 3 nights ago, his wife Sarah had pressed her bloody, trembling hand to his cheek, whispered his name, and died. 3 nights of walking in this brutal Montana country wasn't walking, it was a death march. "You're lying," he growled. "I ain't lying, mister. Nobody walks 3 nights in a Montana blizzard." "Then I reckon I'm nobody." The bundle in her arms made a soft sound. Not a cry, but a small breath, almost a laugh, the kind of sound a baby makes when it doesn't yet know it is dying. Rowan's eyes flicked down to the infant, and the child's eyes flicked up to him. Something deep inside Rowan's chest, something that had been frozen solid for 3 days, cracked along a hairline fracture he hadn't known was there. "Who's the child?" "My daughter." "Where's her father?" The woman looked away into the white-gray nothingness of the storm. "Behind me." "How far behind?" "Not far enough." Rowan scanned the tree line. He saw nothing, but out here, that didn't mean nothing was there. "Stand up, ma'am. Or so help me." "I can't. There's a ball of lead in my shoulder. Been there since Tuesday." Inside the cabin, Eli started screaming again. The silence had lasted barely 40 seconds. Rowan's jaw locked so tight he tasted iron. "What's your name?" "Mara. Mara Calloway. Mrs. Calloway. I'm going to lower this rifle. You're going to come inside and sit by the fire. You ain't going to touch nothing, and you ain't going to ask me nothing. The second the storm breaks, you're on your way. You understand me?" "Yes, sir. I'll walk." She tried to stand, but her knees gave out. As she fell, the baby slid sideways, and she caught the child with a guttural, desperate sound, like an animal taking a bullet. Rowan was off the porch before he even realized he had moved. He dropped the rifle in the snow, bent down, and took the baby first. He tucked the tiny girl inside his own heavy coat, pressing her against his chest. She instantly went still and warm, as if she had always belonged there. "Put your good arm over my shoulder," Rowan ordered. "I'll get blood on you." "There's already blood on me." He lifted her. She was heavy, but he was hollowed out by grief and fueled by pure adrenaline. He dragged her across the porch, through the heavy wooden door, and dropped her into the rocking chair by the hearth, Sarah's chair. The chair that belonged to nobody now. In the cradle on the kitchen table, Eli was screaming so hard his tiny face had turned purple. "Mister, your boy," Mara gasped, clutching her bleeding shoulder. "I know he's hungry." "I know that, too," Rowan muttered, staring at the floorboards. "How long?" 3 days. His mother passed. The cow's milk turned. Town is 40 miles out. I rode out twice, couldn't get past the second creek. I came back because I wasn't going to let him die alone." Mara was already tearing at the frozen buttons of her coat with her one good hand. She couldn't get the second one open. Her fingers were numb, shaking violently. Help me with the buttons, mister. Rowan stood frozen. Mister? Your boy ain't got time for your manners. Help me. Rowan stepped forward, keeping his eyes firmly on the rough fabric of her coat. He undid the stiff buttons. She pulled open her shirt. Bring him here, she commanded softly. Rowan lifted Eli from the cradle and placed his screaming son into the crook of Mara's uninjured arm. And Eli, who had wailed for 3 agonizing days and nights, latched on and went completely silent. The silence was so sudden, so heavy, that Rowan had to grip the back of the wooden chair just to stay on his feet. He stood there, head bowed, eyes squeezed shut. Blackthorn men didn't cry. But his broad shoulders shook, trembling the way a man shakes when the agony is being torn out of him from the inside. Mister, Mara whispered a few moments later. Get my baby out of your coat. She's been quiet too long. Rowan carefully pulled the bundle from his jacket and laid the infant, Pearl, in Mara's lap. The baby looked up with those piercing blue eyes and made that small, breathless laugh again. Mara's entire body sagged in relief. 11 weeks old, Mara whispered. And you walked her through a blizzard with a bullet in you? Rowan turned away, grabbing a heavy iron kettle from the stove. That ball, it's gone septic. I can smell it. I'll get it out. You a doctor? I was a field surgeon at Cold Harbor. Then you'll do. He brought boiling water, a bottle of cheap whiskey, and a clean strip of cloth torn from Sarah's nightgown. He didn't let himself think about the fabric. Mara held both babies now, nursing them simultaneously. She had milk enough for 2, and milk to spare. Rowan cut the fabric of her dress away from the shoulder. When he saw the rotting wound, his breath hitched. Mister, it's bad. I know, Mara said, her voice like grinding stone. Just get it out. Don't worry about hurting me. My husband held my head under bathwater for 10 minutes the night I gave birth to this baby. He set her cradle on fire while she was in it. I crawled out a window with a bullet in my back and walked 60 miles. You ain't going to hurt me. Rowan went to work. He dug into the infected flesh. Mara didn't scream. She bit down on a strip of thick leather, clutching both babies tight to her chest, her eyes wide and wet in the firelight. When the soft, blackened piece of lead finally popped free, Rowan set it on the hearth with the solemn care a man reserves for something holy. He cleaned the wound, packed it, and stitched it closed with his dead wife's sewing thread. When he finished, he sat back on his heels, palms flat on the floorboards, breathing heavily. Rowan, Mara murmured, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. I'm going to sleep now. If I don't wake up, take the baby to the Wexlers in Iron Ridge. They're decent people. There's a letter in my coat pocket. Don't read it unless I'm dead. You're going to wake up, he said fiercely. Promise me about the letter. I promise. She slept. Both babies slept peacefully on her chest. Rowan banked the fire and sat in the chair opposite her, watching the steady, synchronized rise and fall of their breathing. He refused to sleep. If he closed his eyes, he feared he would wake up to find her dead, and he knew he could not survive burying another woman in the same week. At dawn, Mara opened her eyes. Rowan, did I die? No, ma'am. She looked down at the infants. Eli had a tiny fist curled tightly into a lock of Mara's hair. I want to ask you something straight, Rowan, she said, her voice devoid of its earlier exhaustion. My husband, nothing stops him. He's maybe 2 days behind. What's his name? She studied Rowan's face for a long time, weighing the truth. Victor Graves. Rowan's expression didn't change, but his hands did. He set his tin coffee cup on the table with a slow, terrifying precision. The cup didn't even rattle. I know him, Rowan said softly. He was my captain at Cold Harbor. Then you know exactly what he is. And you're going to put me back out in the snow? No, ma'am, I ain't. He'll burn this place down, Rowan. Let him try. You gave my boy his life back last night. I owe you till the day I die. That ain't a debt, Mara said, a single tear slipping down her cheek. That's just being a human being. Just let me stay till the shoulder closes. Then I'll go before he sees your smoke. Rowan leaned forward, his voice hard as iron. You ain't earning nothing. You ain't a charity case. You walked into the one house in this valley with a starving baby who needed exactly what you had to give. You think God's aim is that bad? Stay as long as you need, Mara. Stay forever, if forever is what you got. He looked at the dawn light creeping through the frosted window. A cold, absolute clarity washed over him. He was going to kill Victor Graves. He wasn't going to be killed by him, and he wasn't going to bury his son. He was going to kill his former captain with his own 2 hands. Don't thank me yet, Mara warned. He's coming. He won't ride up the front road. He sends a man first. A smiler. A lawyer named Hollis Reed. He'll have a fake deputy star and he'll call me Mrs. Graves. Let me handle him, Rowan said. No, Mara interrupted, her tone sharp. He'll trip you up in a lie. I have to do the talking. I'm going to tell him that Mara Graves died in the storm. Froze to death 2 miles south alongside her baby. That ain't going to hold. It'll hold long enough for me to become somebody else by spring. I can't be Mrs. Graves anymore. I'd rather be a ghost. She looked at her daughter, then at the heavy wooden ceiling beams. From now on, I am Mara Calloway. My maiden name. And I'm your dead cousin's widow from St. Louis. I came west to keep house for you because your wife passed and your boy needed a wet nurse. The storm took my wagon and my trunk. Rowan stared at her. You've been planning this. For 2 years. Ever since he set the cradle on fire. Rowan stood up. He walked to the wall and unhooked a framed tintype photograph of a young soldier. He laid it face up on the table. This is your husband? My cousin, Daniel Calloway. Dead 12 years now. Memorize his face. Memorize his birthday. If anyone asks, you cry once and change the subject. That's what widows do. Rowan turned back to the frozen window, his eyes narrowing at the empty tree line. You want to know who I lost before Sarah? My brother, Caleb. Cold Harbor. Captain Victor Graves sent him into a creek bed at 3 in the morning with no cover. 12 went in. 2 came back. I've been waiting for Victor Graves for 6 years, Mara. I just didn't know it until today. Ryder, Rowan's voice was a low rumble, barely louder than the crackling hearth. He didn't turn from the frosted window. A single man on a single horse was coming up the long, snow-choked road from the south at a slow, deliberate walk. He held his hat in his hand, a glint of metal pinned to his heavy winter coat, a leather satchel slung across his back. Hollis, Mara breathed. How long? 8 minutes to the gate. 2 more to the porch. Rowan didn't hesitate. Take the babies into the back room. Both of them. Shut the door. Whatever you hear, Mara, do not come out. I ain't leaving you alone with him, she fired back, her good hand gripping the edge of the table. I'm the only one who can lie to him and live. You go in there. If my daughter cries, you put your hand over her mouth. Hollis Reed has known the sound of Pearl's cry since the night she was born. He'll recognize it through 3 solid doors. Do as I say, Rowan. Rowan's jaw worked, but he didn't argue. He scooped up Eli, then carefully lifted Pearl in her makeshift drawer bed, carrying them both into Sarah's empty sick room. He sat on the cold floorboards, his back pressed hard against the door, Eli warm against his chest. His hand hovered near the heavy Colt on his hip. He listened. Boots heavy on the porch. 2 soft, polite knocks. Mrs. Graves. The voice was smooth, carrying effortlessly through the thick wood. Mara's voice rang out, calm as a Sunday church bell. There ain't no Mrs. Graves here, mister. You got the wrong house. Ma'am, my name is Hollis Reed. I'm a deputy out of Bozeman. I'm looking for a Mara Graves and her infant daughter, Pearl. They went missing 9 days ago. There's a husband in town near out of his mind with worry, That's a sad story, mister, but it ain't mine. I'm Mara Calloway, widow to Daniel Calloway out of St. Louis. I come west to keep house for my husband's cousin, but the storm took my wagon. I ain't seen another woman or baby in 3 weeks. A long, suffocating pause. The kind of pause a predator takes before it strikes. Would you object if I stepped inside a moment to warm up? Hollis asked smoothly. The wind out here will cut a man in half. I would object, mister. My husband's cousin is a widower. His wife passed Tuesday. There ain't been a week of mourning yet, and I ain't about to entertain a man in this kitchen with him out at the fence line. You can ride on to Iron Ridge. There is a reward, ma'am. $200 federal. I'll tell you what I know for free, deputy. Mara's voice was pure steel. Any woman who runs 9 days through a Montana winter with an infant is running from something worse than what she's running into. And a deputy with a smile like yours don't strike me as the something better. Now you ride on, Mr. Reed, before I call my cousin in from the fence. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, the slow creak of leather. Boots receding. A horse turning back the way it came. Inside the bedroom, Rowan counted to 200. Then he counted to 200 again. When he finally opened the door, Mara was sitting exactly where he had left her, her face the color of wet ash. He believed you, Rowan said. He pretended to believe me, Mara whispered. He rides away from $200 because the $1,000 reward is 2 days behind him on a black horse. He wants to point at the cabin when Victor gets here. He's coming, Rowan. Rowan gently set Eli in her lap. He walked to the far wall. He took down the Winchester rifle. He took down his father's heavy Colt. He took down his dead brother's smaller Colt. He laid all three on the kitchen table, right next to the sleeping baby in the drawer. Mara looked at the guns. Then she reached out with her broad, red, uninjured hand, pulled Caleb Blackthorn's smaller Colt across the rough wood, and laid it in her lap. When he comes up that road, she said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper, he don't go back down it. No, ma'am, Rowan agreed. He don't. By dusk, Rowan had hammered heavy wooden boards over every window except the one in the kitchen. Mara had insisted it stay clear. She wanted to see Victor's face when he came up the steps. Rowan didn't argue. He positioned 4 loaded shotguns around the room, one in the corner, one by the door, one in the woodbox, and one across the overhead rafters. At the table, Mara was methodically breaking down the small Colt with her one good hand, wiping each cylinder with gum oil. My daddy taught me, she murmured. He was a gunsmith in Lexington. Taught me for 6 years before he sold me to Victor for a debt and a piece of bottom land. I was 16. Rowan's hammer stopped mid-swing. He swallowed the bitter taste in his mouth and drove the final nail home. Before either could speak again, a new sound caught through the howling wind. It wasn't the crisp trot of a horse. It was a long, dragging step. A pause. Another agonizing step. Rowan was at the unboarded window in a second. Mule. One rider slumped over. The rider slid sideways from the saddle, hitting the snowbanks with a silent, lifeless thud. Don't go out there, Rowan, it's a trick, Mara warned, her hand flying to the Colt. Mara, that body's a woman. Rowan grabbed his rifle and plunged into the biting cold. When he reached the motionless figure, his breath caught. It was a young girl, heavily pregnant, 8 months at least. Her lips were a terrifying shade of blue, her face hollowed by dehydration and frostbite. He scooped her up, feeling the hard knot of the unborn child against his ribs, and kicked the cabin door open. Mara had already cleared the table and thrown down heavy wool quilts. Tess! Mara cried out, her stoic facade shattering instantly. She tore at the girl's frozen coat. Tess, baby, look at me. The girl's eyelids fluttered. A soundless sob wrecked her frail body. Mara, he killed Annie. 2 nights ago. He found her in the root cellar and beat her till she didn't move. He made me watch. He locked me in the smokehouse, but the Mexican boy, Mateo, he gave me his mule. He told me to ride. The room seemed to violently tilt on its axis. Annie was my sister, Rowan, Mara whispered, staring at the blood-stained table. She was 19. I left her behind because I couldn't carry her and Pearl both. She told me to go. She said she'd be right behind me. Rowan crossed the room and placed a heavy, grooming hand on the back of Mara's neck. She didn't pull away. On the table, Tess let out a sudden, blood-curdling scream, gripping her swollen belly. Mara, the baby's coming. I've been bleeding since the second creak. I can't deliver a baby with a hole in my shoulder, Mara panicked, looking at Rowan. You said you were a field surgeon. Have you ever delivered a baby? Twice. How'd they go? One lived, Mara. Rowan didn't wait for a response. He rolled up his sleeves, scrubbed his hands with lye soap up to his elbows 3 times, and returned to the table. He looked down at the terrified, freezing girl who had ridden a dying mule out of the dark just to bring Mara the news of her dead sister. Tess, Rowan said, his voice carrying the calm, absolute authority of a man who had pulled boys back from the brink of death at Petersburg. You've been the bravest woman in this territory today. Be brave for 1 more hour. We're going to get this baby born. You hear me? I hear you, she sobbed. For 40 agonizing minutes, the cabin was filled with screams, the coppery scent of blood, and Mara's low, steady voice singing in Olden to keep the girl grounded. Finally, a small, wet, squalling weight slipped into Rowan's bloody hands. You have a daughter, Tess, Rowan exhaled. Tess started to laugh, then cry, and then her eyes rolled back into her skull as she went utterly limp. She's bleeding bad. Rowan yelled, shoving the newborn into Mara's arm. Real bad. Do not let her die in my kitchen, Rowan. Mara shrieked, tears finally streaming down her face. Do not let Victor have 1 more body in my name. Rowan worked with frantic, brutal precision. He packed, he pressed, he stitched. The bleeding slowed. Then it stopped. Tess drew a ragged breath, her chest rising. She was alive. Rowan collapsed onto the floorboards, his back against the table leg, his bloody hands resting on his knees. He stared blankly at the ceiling, trying to remember how to breathe. What's her name? Mara whispered to the exhausted mother, cradling the newborn. Tess looked at the infant with heavy, half-open eyes. Annie. Annie Honeycutt. Mara closed her eyes, pressing her lips to the baby's forehead. He's coming, Rowan. 10 hours, maybe less. Rowan pushed himself up from the floor. He washed the blood from his hands, dried them, and picked up his Winchester. He checked the load, the lever, the iron sights. I'm fixing to ride out at midnight, Rowan said, his voice hollow and flat. I'm meeting him at Cup Bank Pass. He ain't making it to this house. You are not leaving this house. Mara flared, stepping in front of the door. You swore to me he dies on this porch. We bury him together under the cottonwood. You don't walk out that door. If I die tonight, you ain't dying tonight. Mara, listen to me. Rowan snapped, grabbing a thick, leather-bound Bible from the shelf. He pulled a folded piece of paper from the pages and slammed it onto the table. The deed to this ranch. It's signed over to you. I rode down to Iron Ridge while you slept yesterday. I had the clerk witness it. You and Pearl get the ranch. Eli gets the south pasture when he's of age. I wasn't going to leave you here with the law deciding whose kitchen this is. Mara stared at the deed. Her good hand trembled as she reached out, touching the ink of his signature. You gave me this ranch, she whispered, her voice breaking, on the exact same day I told you a monster was coming to kill me. Yes, ma'am. You crazy son of a gun. She stepped forward, ignoring the guns and the blood, and placed her warm, broad hand against the side of his weary face. You don't die tonight, Rowan Blackthorne. Because there is a boy in that back room who took your name today. There's a girl in there who will take it tomorrow. And there is a woman in this kitchen who would like to take it by spring. You hear me? Rowan couldn't speak. He turned his face slightly, pressing his cheek into the warmth of her palm, and closed his eyes. Outside, a soft, deliberate sound broke the silence. Not boots. The slow scrape of a leather glove against the wooden porch. They froze. Mara raised the shotgun. Rowan lifted the rifle. Mrs. Calloway, a smooth voice called from the other side of the heavy oak door. It wasn't Victor. Mrs. Calloway, it's Deputy Reed. Don't shoot. I need you to open the door. Mara, don't answer, Rowan mouthed across the room, his finger tightening on the trigger. Outside, the man's voice wavered. Mrs. Calloway, I know you're awake. I can see the lamp. He's an hour behind me. I came up the back road. Mara shook her head slowly. No. Mara, the deputy pleaded, the use of her first name making her flinch. I had a sister, too. Her name was Eliza. A man like Victor broke every bone in her hand, and she swallowed lie to escape him. I shot him in the public square in Topeka. I've been working undercover for 13 months, riding beside men like Victor Graves, waiting for the right night to put them in the ground. Tonight is the night. Rowan's eyes locked with Mara's. He didn't lower his rifle. Step back from the door, Rowan called out. Lay your pistol down and sit on the porch with your hands on your knees. When Rowan opened the door a fraction, Hollis Reed was exactly as instructed. Rowan ushered him inside, stripping him of his weapons. Annie is alive, Reed said the moment he sat at the kitchen table. The room went dead still. Mara stopped breathing. Tess saw what Victor wanted her to see, Reed explained urgently. He beat Annie unconscious, but she had a pulse. She's tied in the bed of a wagon half a mile down the back road right now, guarded by a 15-year-old boy named Mateo. We don't have much time. Rowan was already moving, pulling his heavy coat back on. Saddle the horses. Mara, you stay here. Do not open this door for any man but me. I swear to you on my son's name, I will bring her home. The ride was 9 minutes of hard, breathless galloping through the freezing dark. When they found the wagon, the young boy, Mateo, raised a rifle, but lowered it instantly when he saw Reed. You did right by Tess, and you're doing right by Annie, Reed told the boy. Ride south. Don't look back. Rowan pulled back the heavy canvas top in the wagon bed. Annie Calloway lay bound and gagged in the freezing cold, her face severely bruised from temple to jaw, her left arm in a makeshift flour sack sling. Rowan cut her bindings, his hands steady. Annie Calloway, my name is Rowan Blackthorne. Your sister's waiting for you in a warm kitchen with a shotgun on her lap. We're taking you home. When Rowan carried Annie through the cabin door, the shotgun slipped from Mara's grasp, clattering to the floorboards. She didn't care. She wrapped her good arm around her younger sister, burying her face in Annie's ash-blonde hair, letting out a fractured sob, the agonizing sound of a woman who had been carrying a coffin for 4 days, only to finally be told it was empty. They didn't have long to celebrate. Hollis Reed took position behind the woodpile outside. Tess sat at the table with her newborn. Rowan stood by the door with a Winchester. And 19-year-old Annie Calloway, battered but unbroken, sat in the chair by the window with Caleb Blackthorne's Colt resting steady in her uninjured hand. 14 minutes later, the slow, deliberate crunch of boots echoed in the snow. Mara, darling, Victor Graves' voice drifted through the heavy wood, thick with false warmth. Open the door. Mara didn't make a sound. I have a deputy and 2 good men with me, Victor warned, his tone hardening. I'll have Mr. Quinn put his shoulder to this door. Open the door, Victor, and find out, a voice called from inside. It wasn't Mara. It was Annie. The steady, low voice of a ghost. A suffocating silence descended on the porch, the heavy, terrifying silence of a predator realizing it had stepped blind into a trap. Annie? Victor faltered, taking a step back. You are dead. I watched you die. Then I am a dead woman with a Colt, Annie replied. Open the door. Rowan threw the bolt and yanked the door open. Bart Quinn stumbled forward, reaching for his pistol. Rowan shot him straight through the heart at point-blank range. Quinn hit the floorboards without a sound. In the dark of the porch, Victor drew his weapon, but Annie fired first through the open doorway. The bullet tore through Victor's right shoulder, spinning him violently around. From the woodpile, Reed fired a single shot, dropping the third man in the snow before he could even raise his rifle. It was over in 4 seconds. Victor Graves was on his knees, his right arm hanging useless, his hands scrabbling desperately in the snow for his dropped gun. Rowan stepped over Quinn's body and pressed the hot muzzle of the Winchester to the back of Victor's neck. "Captain Graves," Rowan growled, his voice a low rumble of pure thunder. "You remember a creek bed at Cold Harbor? 3 a.m, 12 men, no cover. One of the dead was my brother, Caleb." Victor looked up, his face gaunt, but the slick, practiced smile of a survivor was already crawling back onto his mouth. "You're not going to kill me, Mr. Blackthorne. You were an officer. I gave a lawful order." "No, sir. I ain't going to kill you," Rowan stepped back, lowering the rifle. "Because there is a woman in this house who has the right of it, and I gave her my word." Mara stepped out onto the porch. She walked up to Victor and looked down into his face from 2 feet away. "I divorced you the night you set my daughter's cradle on fire," she said, her voice cutting through the freezing night. "You used my sister's body to break me. You thought you buried her. But she's standing right here with a gun pointed at the hole in your chest where your heart would be. You are going to live, Victor. You're going to live a long time in a federal prison in Deer Lodge. And every single day, you are going to know that the woman you tried to kill walked out of your house on her own 2 feet. They didn't bury anyone that night. The frozen ground was too hard, and there were 3 babies inside who needed their mothers far more than the dead needed graves." At first light, Hollis Reed rode south with Victor Graves tied securely to his saddle. Rowan rode out for the doctor, the sheriff, and the priest. Sarah Blackthorne was finally given a proper burial beneath the old cottonwood tree, with Mara standing firmly beside Rowan, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. In April, Rowan and Mara were married beneath that same tree. The family they built out of the ashes of that blizzard lasted 4 generations. Victor Graves died of pneumonia 17 years later in a prison cell, buried in an unmarked grave that no one ever visited. Mara lived to be 79, passing peacefully in the bed she shared with Rowan, surrounded by a family that had grown deep and wide. Rowan followed her in the spring, buried right beside her. But the kitchen window remained. And on the sill, sitting quietly behind the frosted glass, was a small piece of blackened, soft lead, the bullet Rowan had pulled from Mara's shoulder. It was a silent monument to the night a bleeding woman knocked on a stranger's door, and out of the snow and the darkness, forged an empire.